that when Jesus was looking for his 12, Luke was a must-be in the camp. Why would I say that? Because Luke has an accountability in his writing. Luke is found with Jesus and after the death of Jesus as a writer. Only one besides he who shall follow me that has a book of the gospel and after the death of Jesus Christ. Luke is one who has written as much as a recorder of what Jesus himself spoke from his mouth. Sometimes we are so quick to run to another book because of familiar passions of words. I find that Luke has mentioned about the prodigal son. It's not just the son my eyes is focused on tonight. But my eyes is focused on my father. Oh, I heard Mr. Matthew say that. What were you doing? And Reverend Eddie came back, Pastor Eddie came back and asked the question about the gospel. And now I want to ask you about your father. I find that Luke said that in the writing of the prodigal son as Jesus was speaking, it said clearly that he knew that God was not asleep. He said, "Arise and go to my father." And would say unto him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee." That leaves the question, is it important that we understand that sinning among each other is not as great as sinning against heaven? It leaves the question that we need to ask, why is it so important that we make peace with heaven? I find that we need to look at Luke, because Luke was not only a writer, but he was a friend to the friend. He was a friend to those who knew salvation during and after the fact, because after the death of Jesus came along Paul, and Peter was already there, and Luke was their personal friend. Sometimes we need to check our friends and see what we are hanging around, but now the prodigal son had already done his deed. Like some of us, he has asked for everything that he thought he could get. Not remembering in my mind that he already spent and used just as much as what was left. We are sometimes finding ourselves thinking that it's all right to do any and everything. We find ourselves looking and judging without trying to judge and trying to justify through the Word of God. But here we find that Luke has written about what Jesus had to say. We find that Luke had more of the parables of Jesus saying than any other book. I'll number the one to follow me by two. I'll number the first one by 9. Oh, and only the second had 25. Luke. My God, written by 24 parables. Sometimes in our life, when I think about how happy I am, I have to think about where I'm going. They always told me you always know where you've been, but you don't know where you're going. But I found out that that's not as true. If I can count on Jesus.
I see you. I see you. I see you.
Now that's true if I can count on Jesus. Jesus say that I'll never leave you. Neither will I forsake you. I don't know about nobody else, but he told me if I need him, I can call him. But here's the prodigal son now, after the spending his goods. Find out that those people I hang around with the church that ain't hot no more ain't my friends. Found out that the world with that green artificial grass over there is not as good as I thought it was. Oh, when I used to sleep at the motel, thought I was having comfort because my bed at home wasn't good enough. I found out that it wasn't good enough. See, when you make up your mind that heaven is your goal, you got to know that heaven has a controller. Sometimes when we go into the house of God, we take it for granted. Sometimes we want to overrun the pastor. Sometimes we want to overlook the rules and regulations. Sometimes we don't even want to participate. Sometimes we don't even show up. But here, he is concerned about heaven. Maybe heaven ain't important to some of us. Maybe heaven is not our goal, but when you have a made-up mind, hell is not a choice. If heaven is your home. I don't know about nobody else tonight, but the prodigal son here made an important statement. He wasn't worried about his earthly daddy. Wait a minute, let me tell you what Luke did. The Bible says that, I have to touch it tonight, that Pastor Matthew said that the 42 generation, but wait a minute, it was counting Mary genealogical tree. But Luke looked at the father, which sometimes we forget about the daddy. Sometimes we forget about it because he doesn't seem important. Sometimes we forget about it because he's absent from the scene. But Luke made it clear, I need to tie Joseph up with the root of David. I tell you, when you go backwards, see Mark, I tell you, Luke went from Joseph up the stream to Adam, while Matthews went down. But I tell you tonight, if you go back to your father, you'll find that your father's seed is concerned about the lost ones. Sometimes we find that the father is not pleased, and we got to get it right. I think about what Luke said. He said, I believe I'll rise. I'm going to get out of my condition. I'm going to decide for myself. I can make a change within my own. And I'm going to look for my father to receive me. I don't care what the people say. I don't care what my brothers say. I believe that heaven saw me tonight when I was doing wrong. But now I decide to go home. Do you have a home you can go to? Is your father looking for you? Is he waiting with open arms, saying, come whosoever will? Is your father happy to know that you're on your way? Do your father have an insurance policy on you that declares, I got room for you just in case you decide to come? I don't know about nobody tonight, but I'm thinking about what Luke said. Luke, he wrote at the end of Jesus. He's the only one recorded. He got the most of the last 7 sayings. Luke made it very clear at the end that God the Father is in control of the Spirit. I heard when Jesus said, into thy hands. I commend my spirit. I don't know about nobody tonight, but if your spirit is in God's hand, it's all right. But I tell you tonight, you ought to be glad tonight. You ought to be glad. You ought to be glad that God is not asleep. Is willing to hear your prayers. Is willing to forgive. Is willing to deliver. You ought to be glad tonight that the sun didn't go down on you today. You ought to be glad somebody got time to turn around and tell Jesus, I'm sorry for all my sins. I heard David said, created me, but I know tonight if we just turn